Alright guys, so here we are with the return of the Five Nights at Freddy's Tales from the Pizzaplex Graphic Novel Volume 2 situation. Most of it happened back in July, so as a little refresher, basically the Tales from the Pizzaplex Graphic Novel Volume 2, it was originally going to be released on September 2nd of 2025, but then it got leaked early, way early, all the way back in July, and the quality of it,
What the fuck? We got a leak! Hey, yo, what the?
Yeah, it looks really bad, unfortunately. It was very disappointing. Edwin and Fiona, they just look weird. I mean, we don't even need to take their Secret of the Mimic designs into account because they just look weird on their own. They look like these weird teenage weird things. Like Edwin, he looks like some sort of Bob Ross, Rick Astley look-alike. Like, why does he look like that? And the Mimic, don't even get me started on him, man. They just took Ruined Mimic, chopped his legs off, and then made him blue. And it just doesn't make sense. Like, why does he look like that?
Why are you blue?
Here's a great model made by the Pizzeria roleplay team, DJ Sinister and all that over there. They made this brilliant model for their Roblox fan game, and they beat out this version of the Mimic in this leaked graphic novel. I mean, look at that, man. This one is way more accurate to what's described in the books. The one in the graphic novels, the official one, is literally just a copy and pasted, downgraded version of Ruined Mimic. And people were rightfully frustrated at this. They were spending their money on this book and just to receive some garbage, really lazy quality artwork. I mean, one of the main reasons you want to buy the graphic novel is to see the graphics in the novel. You don't want to see this trash. Why are we getting this? People were rightfully frustrated. And then a little bit after, they decided to cancel the novels. They decided to completely take them down from a bunch of online listings, and it was listed as cancelled. And the same thing happened with Volume 3 of the Tales from the Pizzaplex graphic novel. It was kind of roped into this because we also saw a few official previews of that, and people were not happy with the quality of that, but it was definitely not as loud as the ones with the leaks. But eventually they popped up again, and they received these weird cover not final, random temporary placeholder covers. And then Volume 3's release date was changed to September 1st of 2026. And then Volume 2's release date was changed to January 1st of 1900. That's like 114 years before the original Five Nights at Freddy's game, the first game. And that's how many years before even modern computers were invented. That's crazy. And that's where we left off in mid-July last time in Part 3. And after that, the release date just kept on changing a couple times. And now Volume 2 is going to be released in April of 2026. And then Volume 3 is going to be released in September of 2026. And now we've finally gotten the cover for just Volume 2 with the Secret of the Mimic design for the Mimic on the cover. So yeah, as expected, they're just going to be using the Secret of the Mimic version of the Mimic instead of making a book-accurate version of the Mimic, which is kind of disappointing, but it was definitely expected that this was very likely the route that they were going to go in. But I do want to start off with some good, and that is obviously that the cover for this one is much better than the original version with the Ruined Mimic design on the cover, which it had more of a stylized 2D look, but this one, it looks like they definitely went for a more, not really realistic exactly, but more of a shaded and more detailed design, with more shading and all that, compared to the original one, which is just more of a flat design. It's still got some sort of shading and details on there, but definitely more intricate and has a lot more effort put into it. More of a realistic rendering, kind of, compared to the old cover. Also, the graphic novel is now being illustrated by a completely different illustrator compared to the original illustrator who made the version that the leak was from, the poor quality version. But now that it's been basically confirmed that they're using the Secret of the Mimic designs for this novel, there's a couple of things I want to discuss. The first thing is, I wonder if some people who don't realize that the books aren't canon to the games, if they read the book and see the designs from Secret of the Mimic in them, the ones from the games that they're used to, are they going to get confused on why the story doesn't match up to what they saw in the game? People who are learning about the lore might pick up this book and assume that what they're reading is actually a prequel to Secret of the Mimic and not realize that it's set in a separate continuity. Maybe they'll think they completely misremember the game or come up with some sort of convoluted headcanon where this version of the Mimic story in the graphic novel fits in with the Secret of the Mimic timeline. Or maybe they'll just be left really confused and disappointed that this story in the graphic novel just doesn't match up with what they remember in Secret of the Mimic. It just doesn't match up with the games at all. They'll just be very disappointed that they just purchased this for nothing. They just didn't really learn anything new from it. But I think it's unlikely that people who pick up this book are going to be ones that don't know much about the lore. I feel like mostly hardcore fans are going to be the ones picking up the graphic novel. And even if people who don't know much about the lore do decide to pick up and read this book, I do think they will most likely realize that, oh, this book is set in a separate timeline from the games, just like the movies, where the lore is very different from the games in the movie timeline compared to the game timeline. So it's probably the same case here with the book timeline compared to the games timeline. But at the same time, I know there's people who's watched the movies and they weren't happy that it was very different from the games with the lore, especially with the second one. They were either very confused, or they tried to tie it into the game timeline, or they just didn't like the approach the movie went with it being very different from the game. So I don't know. But if Scholastic decided to make the designs more accurate to the books, or at least give the game designs some elements from the book designs, then at least people would be more aware of the fact that this graphic novel is not supposed to be connected to the games, to Secret of the Mimic. But if they strayed away from the game designs and made it more accurate to the books, would that lead to the books getting less sales compared to if it had the games design on the cover? But it could go either way. If people see the Mimic from Secret of the Mimic on the cover, they might get really excited and decide to buy the book because it's something they recognize. But it's something that they've never seen before. They might just miss that it's the Mimic, or just not be interested in it entirely. But it could go in the opposite direction, where if people see the Mimic from the games, from Secret of the Mimic, something they've already seen before, they might just not be interested in it and decide to not pick it up because it's nothing new. They've already seen that Mimic before. But if it was a book-accurate Mimic, something that they've never seen before, they might be more interested in why the Mimic looks so different. It's something new, it's something they haven't seen before, so they might decide to check it out and buy it. Although it could go either way, I do think Scholastic made the more safe choice into choosing the game's design over a more book-accurate design because it's more recognizable and something that people are more comfortable with. So I do think they made the better choice, at least sales and marketing wise. And since they decided to go with the Secret of the Mimic design over the Ruin design, my question is, was the reason they cancelled the graphic novel in the first place because they wanted to use the Secret of the Mimic design, the new game design, instead of something outdated? Or was it just because of how the original one looked, with it being just so lazy looking and just so bad quality? And did the leaks have anything to do with it being cancelled? I do think it's a combination of all of these, but I do think the leaks were a major part of it, whether that's because it was just leaked in the first place or because of the outcry and backlash from the fans because of the leaks. Secret of the Mimic released a month before the graphic novel was cancelled. So if the graphic novel was cancelled because they wanted to use the Secret of the Mimic designs, why do it a month after the game was released? Why not a few days after, when the game was shown to be very popular amongst fans? Or even like 2 weeks after, at most? I think maybe they thought they were too far into production with the graphic novel, so that's why they decided to not do it then. It was just not a big enough reason for them. It would just be a huge waste if they just threw out all this work. But then again, they would only have to throw out the work they did on the Mimic story. The other 2 stories, they wouldn't really be affected by this, so they still probably could have done it, but then I guess they just didn't want to pressure the people working on the book, the artist, the illustrator and all that, so maybe that's why, I don't know. And then when the graphic novel was leaked in mid-July, about 2 days later, that's when Graphic Novel Volume 2 was cancelled. And it was only that novel. Volume 3 was left untouched for a little bit. And since it was only Volume 2 that leaked and not Volume 3 of the graphic novel, it's got to be tied to the leak. The thing is, if the fans being upset at the quality of the graphic novels was the main reason, then why didn't they cancel Volume 3 right away? People did not like Volume 3 when some of the previews were released, and when Volume 2 was leaked, Volume 3 was also brought up with how low effort and lazy that it also looked. Maybe because most of the hate was directed to Volume 2, that's why they decided to take Volume 2 down first and cancel it, and then they went back and looked at Volume 3, and then they decided to cancel it after that? That could very well be the case. But what could also be the case is, since Volume 2 was leaked in the first place, people just didn't have a reason to seek out the original book because they just got it for free easily. They got it leaked early. They had no reason to go out and buy it in stores or buy it digitally or anything. They didn't need to. But the version that was leaked was in very low quality and it had a bunch of watermarks on it, so people still might have bought the original to get in high quality without the watermarks compared to the leak, and people probably would have pirated the book for free either way. Also, if the quality of the content was the main reason the book was delayed, then why not do it way sooner? They probably could have caught it way sooner and not wasted as much time. Just cut their losses there and then completely redo it early on. I think they were most likely just being greedy and just didn't care about pushing out this slop. Or maybe they did realize that it was low effort and maybe they wanted to redo it, but they just really wanted to hit those deadlines. They felt pressured to just get the book out there. I want to talk about the Secret of the Mimic design of the Mimic compared to the Tales from the Pizzaplex books design from the Mimic story. They are both really cool, but they're not really interchangeable. They're not really supposed to be the same thing, because the Mimic in the books, he has these chatter teeth, he has these doll eyes, he has pincer-like hands, which is kind of like the left hand on the Mimic from Secret of the Mimic, so I'll give him that. But that's about the only similarity between the two. The Mimic from the Mimic story in the books, it also was described as not having the pistons in the arms. It didn't have the ability to retract its limbs and all that like the Mimic in Secret of the Mimic. It didn't have that ability. It was just one endoskeleton. Although it was described at one point as being an advanced looking endoskeleton. Although it was also made out of scrap parts, just out of whatever Edwin could find. But the main gimmick of the Mimic in the Mimic story compared to the Mimic from Secret of the Mimic, gee, that's a tongue twister, but in the Mimic story, it's about the Mimic program more of. It's not about the endoskeleton retracting and fitting into costumes. Although it does go into multiple costumes, it was not the main function of the Mimic to become any character really. It was just made to mimic the human movements of David. Also, another design that isn't interchangeable with the book's Mimic is the Epilouges Mimic, and this Mimic that appeared on the Hex Keychain. I've seen people call this an official look at the Epilouges Mimic, but that really isn't the case. It's not really accurate to what's described in the Epilouges. The main thing is the Mimic in the Epilouges, he has a metal tube running from the top of his head down into between his eyes, which is kind of there, but the one on the Keychain is more like how it looks like on Ruin Mimic, which isn't accurate to what's described in the Epilouges, where it reaches all the way to the top of his head, kind of like Endo 2 and all that. Also, his limbs are supposed to be more entangled in black wires, black cables around him. He doesn't have that here. And he also looks more like a regular endoskeleton. He doesn't really have the metal rods, curved plates, the ball joints, the pumping pistons that were on him that were described in the Epilouges, which is very different looking from an average endoskeleton. Here, it's just very plain looking. The mouth and the jaw, I'm pretty sure it's described as being more of a squared metal mouth. It's kind of like that here. It's supposed to be a hinged jaw in the Epilouges. It's kind of like that here. It's kind of hard to tell. But the teeth are inaccurate to the Epilouges. In the Epilouges, they're described as being huge white teeth. While in the Keychain, they're very sharp, small looking teeth. The eyes as well, they're supposed to be encased in square metal sockets, but then here, there just doesn't appear to be any eye sockets at all. Not even the round ones that were on Ruin Mimic. There just doesn't appear to be any on this guy at all. And this guy on the Keychain also doesn't have a rib cage that was described in the Epilouges. That might be it on the side there, those two little pieces of metal, but I don't think that's it. That's kind of just looks like a part of the chest. I don't think that's really a rib cage. I could also point out the eyes as well. They don't glow purple in the Epilouges at all, but then of course this is just a Keychain and it's supposed to tie in with the Glitchtrap on the other side, so that makes sense for the Keychain. And this of course isn't supposed to be Epilouges Mimic. And also the ears. Epilouges Mimic does have the ears as a pretty iconic part of him, but here I just want to point out the ears look a little weird. It's like one weird stick and then it's got the more traditional looking endoskeleton ear on there. It's kind of weird. So that's why this version of the Mimic on the Keychain isn't supposed to be Epilouges Mimic. I'm not trying to hate on this design, I'm just saying that it's supposed to be its own thing entirely. It wasn't designed by anyone on the official Five Nights at Freddy's team like Scott or anyone at Steelwool or at Scholastic or whatever. No, it was just approved by Scott's team and it's not supposed to be the Mimic from the Epilouges. So in summary, these 5 versions of the Mimic endoskeleton, and if you want to count the Burn Trap endo, then you might as well say 6. We'll say 6 versions of the Mimic endoskeleton. They all have their similarities, but they're also very different and they're not really interchangeable. And now that they're using the Secret of the Mimic version in the graphic novels, I fear that the true books version of the Mimic from the Mimic story will be overridden. Now, of course, this is just the cover, so maybe he'll look different in the actual story. But then again, look at what happened with the graphic novel Volume 1 with Ballora. She does not look like her book design. She's very different. She's supposed to be different. But they made it like the games version in the story and on the cover. So I think that will be the same case here. Maybe there'll be a couple small differences, like they'll probably just remove the legs at best. But I don't know, guys. I really think they'll just stick with the Secret of the Mimic design. If they do anything at all, they'll probably just remove the legs. I hope they at least do that. I also don't think we're going to get any sort of official response from Scott or Scholastic about the leak situation or why the graphic novel was changed and cancelled with a different artist and all that. I really don't think we're going to get any sort of response, especially it's been like 5 months, so I really don't think we are. So the next part will probably be when we get any sort of official preview or look at this story in the graphic novel, Volume 2. Bye.